Many defensive players showed out and showed up during spring sessions, but the one who has my attention is Elijah O'Neal.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Thanks as always for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast. Stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here once again to talk about the biggest standouts, the biggest winners, if you will, from spring ball sessions. Defensively, it was really hard to narrow it down the way that I did for offense because there was a ton of rotation defensively and a ton of guys caught my attention. Now, I do have a few guys that really stood out that I'm going to shout out, but there was a lot of good defensive play, and that's not a surprise to me because Brian Ward in his first year as a defensive coordinator last year had the guys just running with their hair on fire and playing like they had chemistry that had lasted 2 or 3 years previously. Like these guys just played outstanding. And now going into year 2, you lost a few veterans. You don't have Chris Edmonds or Travion Brown or BJ Green transferred. There's certainly losses to Sean Mallory, but you still have guys who developed under this defense last year that stood out this year. And there's a lot of guys that I want to talk about, but we'll start with the man that I shouted out to begin the podcast. That's Elijah O'Neal. O'Neal is now in his senior year. I do not know if he has a COVID year. I can't remember when he got to the program. I don't think he'll have a COVID year, but I could be wrong. As I have said many a times, I have a hard time keeping up with eligibility stuff. But O'Neal has really, really stood out in spring ball. There's been some times where he's looked like the best edge rusher. And keep in mind, ASU has good edge rushers. You've got Clayton Smith, who we're going to talk about a little bit in a moment. You've got Prince Dorbah. You've got plenty of other guys to be able to rotate in. But Elijah O'Neal, it's been very difficult to not notice the work that he's put in. And when you have an opportunity to step into a borderline full-time role in the 3-man rotation, it's really pivotal that you find a way to stand out. And O'Neal has stood out. He is fast, explosive off the snap. He's converting that speed to power. He's still learning and growing, but you can tell that the time he has spent behind the scenes learning his craft and getting his skill down is paying off very, very nicely. He's developed wonderfully. And I mentioned BJ Green is gone. And last year, ASU had a really nice rotation between BJ Green, Prince Dorbah, and Clayton Smith. With Green gone, there is a wide open hole here for anybody to step up into, whether it is one of the transfers or one of the freshmen or redshirt freshmen. But Elijah O'Neal has absolutely seized this role. And it's just so cool to see a guy who has bided his time finally be able to flourish. Like I said, there is a big opportunity here, not just for O'Neal, but again, the freshmen and redshirt freshmen and the transfers and the other seniors on this team. It just feels like O'Neal has done more than everybody else. And that's not even a slight to everyone else. Everyone's been working hard. It just feels like O'Neal has been in the lab. He has stood out to me perhaps more than anybody else on defense. And there's been plenty of guys at every level of the defense that I look at and I go, yeah, you look pretty good. Elijah O'Neal looks great. I am very excited for him, especially because if ASU is going to be set on rotating guys in again, when O'Neal gets on the field, you have to be pretty positive that he's either sparing guys as a backup, quote unquote backup as in the rotation, or he's setting the tone as a starter. Either way, really like what I've seen from Elijah O'Neal. This is offensive and defensively, I would tell you easily top 5 guys who have stood out to me the most if I had to rank them. Also want to talk about the guy across from him in Clayton Smith. Clayton Smith bulked up from what I was told. It was anywhere between 15 and 20 pounds. He looks it, dude. He was already someone who had a really nice physique. He just looks like he's ready to take a phone book and rip it in half. He looks capable of doing that. This is somebody that does not have an inch of fat on him. He's so big. He's getting so much stronger than he was last year. And if he is able to convert that speed to power, because goodness, he's quick off the edge. But if he is able to do that, and he is able to start adding more to his pass rushing sets to where he can disengage more and use his hands, this is someone that is ready to break out. Last year, he had 4.5 sacks. The vast majority of them came within the last month of the year. I think he had 3, maybe even 3.5 of them that came in the last month and a half. He just came alive. If he's able to pick up where he left off, and he looks like he can do just that, you've got something special here. Very much looking forward to what Clayton Smith has to offer you. The edge rushing room has just looked good entirely for me. It's just when I look at Elijah O'Neal and Clayton Smith separately, these are the two that if I had to make my starting roster, those would be my 2 starters. And there's guys behind them that they're going to be able to rotate in as well. Like Prince Dorbaugh still looks good. He's not being eliminated from this equation. It's just with the way that O'Neal and Smith have performed so far in camp, and there's a whole summer for them to continue working, and there's a whole training camp for them to get those reps against their teammates and get that extra time actually learning things, learning the playbook, watching tape behind the scenes. Like, there's just that much more room for them to continue growing and becoming better football players. But next, we're going to talk about the rest of the front 7, because there are several veterans who stand out to me. The linebacker position also has really stood out to me. More than a single guy here. So we're going to talk about him in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, game off. We got to pause here and talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. We've talked about it already, but there's so much good stuff in this game. It's hard not to talk about it. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get, including unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings and heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every single day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges, a ton that include their own unique mini games, such as digging for treasure or a robot Penchico machine. And there's always timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something to discover on Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game back on. Look, if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and find that you're turning down the volume because of all the shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or free on the Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get back into our conversation now and take a look at more guys on the defensive side of the football. But specifically, we're going to start with some defensive linemen who have really stood out to me. And I feel that there's been 3 interior guys who have shown me more than anyone else. We'll start with the guy that I talk about all the time, CJ Fite. He's somebody that got a lot of starting time last year as a true freshman. He was able to get onto the field. He made an impact as somebody who could just eat up blocks. He's so big and strong. He is continuing to work on himself, refine his craft. From what I am to understand, he is interested in becoming a better pass rusher this year. I know that one of the standards that he's taking a look to become is the next Will Sutton. And we know that Will Sutton is an all-time great Arizona State player as the 2-time Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. That's a high standard, but that's what you got to do when you are somebody who is working to be the best, is you got to place those kind of expectations on yourself. The next step to be able to get there will be for CJ to turn into a bit of a sack artist. But I mean, I'd say he's got the position down pretty well. He's somebody that is able to anchor. He's somebody that doesn't give up room. He's not going to get run over, and he's going to make life easier for his teammates. He keeps those jerseys clean. He takes on the double teams. He does what he's supposed to do. But he's got some buddies with him. Jacob Kongaika is the next guy I want to shout out. And Kongaika is a beast. Transfer from Arizona. He stood out to me the very first practice where he was going through drills with the defensive linemen, and coaches were stopping and they go, watch Jacob. Pay attention to what Jacob does. Jacob, I want you to show him. He is transferring. This is his first year in Tempe, and he's already somebody that the coaches are using as an example for everybody else. Do it like Jacob does. I want you to see how Jacob does it. I want you to replicate it. Jacob's going to lead the charge. That's hard to ignore. And it's not just in the individual sessions with the positional groups. He's somebody that also looks good. He's someone that also looks like he can anchor and hold his ground. He was okay production with sacks at Arizona. He had a handful. I'm curious if it's him and CJ Fite on the interior. I wonder how that looks from a sack standpoint. I don't know that I see either of them as like 5, 6, 7 sack producers, but I do see them as guys that are going to be able to contribute as long as everything is able to develop the way that we are anticipating them to develop. They look really good. Last guy I want to shout out is Jeff Clark, the transfer from Louisville. He also looks good. He is the graduate player on the defensive line. So naturally, with the most experience there, he's somebody that is also going to be an example for the younger guys, for the incoming freshmen and the redshirt freshmen. Even some of the seniors, like he's seen it all, done it all during his time at Louisville. He is one of the most integral guys on the defensive line, I will tell you. And especially, you look over the last several years, in 2022, you had Nesta Jade Silvera, a graduate transfer from Miami, Florida. He was probably the most important player on the defensive line. Last year, Deshaun Mallory, graduate player transfer from Michigan State. He was arguably the most important player on the defensive line. Jeff Clark, graduate player transferring from Louisville. If history is tending to repeat itself and time is a flat circle, then Jeff Clark could wind up in a full-time role and be the most important player on the defensive line. Having him fight in Kongaika is just a great 1-2-3 punch. And like I said with edge rusher, there's still plenty of younger guys and plenty of veterans and transfers that are also going to be able to rotate in and make life just that much more difficult on opposing offensive lines. You got something really nice with those 3. I want to talk about the linebacker rotation. And there was one guy in particular who stood out to me amongst all the other linebackers, and that was redshirt freshman K'Vion Thunderbird. Now, he comes in last year, 3-star recruit, really fast, kind of compact size, ends up redshirting, which I think we were anticipating a lot of the guys last year to end up redshirting because of all the veterans that were on the team to help establish the culture. K'Vion, just did not see a ton from him last year. This year, he once again is in a rotational role. He's not first team or whatever the order is that they shake out for these guys. But he just looks like he has taken massive strides forward to become a better football player. He looks the part, and in a linebacker room that I don't know if you have one specific guy that is like the starter. Like, I don't think there's a Trey Brown this year. I think that there's a lot of good veterans. There's no reason that K'Vion can't find himself into that rotation and potentially get a very heavy role with the team. Now, with that being said, the linebackers still look really good. Tate Romney continues to impress me. He is somebody that I wouldn't say I was lower on. I just wasn't as in the now with Tate Romney last year going into the season. I was very smitten for Crew Jackson, who unfortunately we did not get to see. Tate Romney ends up being basically a full-time starter last year, top 5 in tackles. I believe he's the top returning tackler from last year. If not, it's Shamari Simmons. You know what? I think it's Simmons the more I think about it. But Tate still looks really good. He is definitely on an inside track for probably the most starting time along the linebackers with everything he had last year. Caleb McCullough looks good. Keyshawn Elliott, I was really high on him coming into the year because of the massive amount of production he had at New Mexico State. He looks like he's going to be able to carve a niche for himself. Maybe he's this year's Trey Brown as the veteran linebacker who is able to just kind of seize that role as the signal caller of the defense. I like him to potentially be in that role. Cyrus Fiaseu has also looked really good for me. Jordan Crook looked quality. Like, it's been a good linebacker rotation. And again, it's hard to narrow it down to one guy specifically for me, but if I had to, it's probably K'Vion Thunderbird. I just feel like he is really developed in his second year. Now, will that lead to a ton of playing time? I have no idea. But from what I saw in spring, he is somebody that will have a ton of my attention throughout the offseason. And once the actual training camp rolls around in late July, early August, he's going to be someone that I'm looking out for. Somebody that I feel can really step into a bigger role and perhaps really open up the future for himself early on in his career. He feels like someone that in year 3 or year 4, however long it takes, is going to end up being a full-time starter for this team. But the way that Thunderbird has performed makes me think that that future could be a lot closer than we may have thought initially. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, because I know that we can make tons of overreactions and assumptions and whatnot. I just really like K'Vion Thunderbird. We're going to switch over to the secondary in a moment. It was even more difficult to nail down a single player in the secondary, but I got probably about 3 guys that I feel deserve the most attention, maybe 4 the more I think about it, but we're going to talk about them in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Game Time is the authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can get those last-minute deals and save up to 60% by buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and any other events. Flash deals, you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the event. Zone deals will allow you to choose the section, and Game Time will choose the seats. All-in pricing is a toggle feature that will show you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy, so you know what to expect when you arrive. And their lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. And of course, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Download Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. One more time, wherever you get your podcasts, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate you as always for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. And a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. We're rounding it out with the secondary. I have got 6 names listed here. All 6 of them really looked good. I think I can identify 3 guys who stood out to me the most, a 4th guy who was right there, and the other 2 who are veterans that I think are going to slide into starting roles. We'll start with those veterans, who are Xavion Alford and LT Welch. Now, we'll start with Alford, who looked really good last year before he was ruled ineligible by the NCAA for their 2-time transfer policy. He looked like one of the best defensive players during training camp last year before he got ruled ineligible. And it was unfortunate because ASU, as good a defense as they yielded last year, they would have been that much better with Alford on the field. I think that you go from like that deceptively good defense because of all the yards they allowed to a defense that was able to match the conversation about them. Like, you look at that defense and you're like, oh, well, they gave up X amount of yards every game, and that was 8th in the conference or whatever. I think that that's better with Alford on the field. And he looks like he's picking up right where he left off. He's still really good. He's still someone that is able to roam around the secondary. Big fan of Xavion Alford. Let's see if he continues to string together good practices. LaTerrence LT Welch should transfer from LSU. There's a reason that he was a former 4-star recruit. He looks good. And you've got a wide open competition at corner right now because Ed Woods left and there's tons of transfers and there's tons of freshmen here. There's an opportunity for playing time, and not just playing time, to be the number 1 corner on this team. And it feels like by the end of spring, LT Welch has, I don't know if I call it the driver's seat just yet, but he feels like he's right there to be the guy in the secondary and be the guy to shade and follow number 1 number 1 receivers around the field. Really like what I saw out of LT Welch. Now, the other 4 guys, I don't know how I would rank them. The one who was really sneakily good for me was Keontez Bradley. And Bradley was someone that I don't know if anyone was expecting a ton of significant snaps for him or him to really take that step forward. He's a redshirt freshman. He did not get very much, if any, playing time at all last year. He's had the year to learn under Brian Carrington and find himself his niche and find himself the comfortability. He looks good. He looks really good. And again, like I said, with Welch, there's a wide open opportunity here for these corners to be able to step up and find themselves full-time roles. And Keontez still has his work cut out for him. As a redshirt freshman, he's going to compete even harder than anybody else to earn that playing time. But you can tell that he's playing with a chip on his shoulder. And you can tell that the way that Keontez Bradley has performed in spring, he's just so far ahead of where he was last year. Very impressed with him. One of the guys who stood out to me the most on any level of the defense. But I will tell you that these 3 really were just the talk of camp. I'm not the only one who was kind of walking away of like, yeah, these guys are really good. We'll start with the obvious name. You listen to this podcast, you know who it is. It's Montana Warren. We've been high on Warren for a reason. This is a football player. This is somebody that just is so utterly talented. The way that he can play deep, near the line of scrimmage, he can go in the slot, he can shade all over the place. This is a weapon. This is a chess piece that you can place all over the defensive alignment and know that he's going to be able to do his assignment at a high level. Last year we missed him because he got injured. He ends up redshirting. Just like what I said about Xavion Alford, he also stood out during camp big time. He was one of the biggest standouts during camp, offensively, defensively, whatever. And he was a true freshman. Well, redshirt freshman got some time to get healthy, get his feet back underneath him, and he looks great. Last two I want to talk about, they're both freshmen, and that's Tony Lewis-Nkuba and Rodney Bimage. Both of them were able to get out here sooner, and both of them looked good. Both of them looked like they're ready for significant playing time. I'm not ready to call them starters because there are veterans ahead of them. But I am ready to tell you that going into the summer and going into the training camp in late July, early August, they're going to be at the top of my list of guys I'm going to be paying attention to. In the secondary, there's a lot of guys. Keith Abney is also somebody that I'm paying attention to. Javen Robinson, someone I'm paying attention to. Those are veteran corners. And yet, Tony Lewis-Nkuba and Rodney Bimage, as freshmen, as true freshmen, they look good. I mean, they were going up against some of the top receivers on the team. And even if they were getting beat, or even if they had a bad rep, I mean, you could just tell that they have, got to say it, they got that dog in them. And they are so interested in just getting better with every snap. And they have short-term memory. You get beat, whatever. Next snap. Give me the next snap. Give me the next one-on-one. I'm ready for it. And keep in mind, they're going up against really good receivers like Jordan Tyson, Jake Smith, Troy O'Mary. They are not getting it easy in their freshman year. But they're still going toe-to-toe with these guys. And again, they're not perfect. Like, they do have bad reps, as you would expect from a true freshman. But the good that you see out of them really is just, I don't think you can ignore it. I walked away in a secondary that is loaded with veteran players. And I sat there and thought, Nkuba and Bimage, those two are going to be guys. They remind me of how I walked away last year with Montana Warren. Like, I was so incredibly high on Montana Warren last year as a true freshman. I feel the exact same way about Tony Lewis-Nkuba and Rodney Bimage. I feel the exact same kind of energy and aura and whatever it is you want to call it. Like, they just, something about them. I just look at them and I go, yeah, they're going to be big time players one day. And again, just to emphasize this point, this is a secondary with a ton of guys. Lots of transfers, lots of veterans, lots of guys who have earned playing time. And they're going to have to keep an eye over, or look over their shoulder, eyes on the back of their head, whatever, because Tony Lewis-Nkuba and Rodney Bimage are going to make life absolute hell for whoever's ahead of them. Very high on the young guys. This is a secondary that has a good blend of the young guys and the veteran guys. But the young guys are so hard to ignore, man. I mean, of the guys I just listed, of the 6 guys I just listed, 2 of them are redshirt freshmen, 2 of them are true freshmen. That's how high I am on these young dudes. So by the time 2025 and 2026 roll around, when they are taking on those roles as the 3-year players, as the 2-year players, and the veterans of the room, I feel great about their future. But I also feel great going into the summer with these guys. Very excited about the secondary. Plenty of guys in the linebacker room that I like. Elijah O'Neal stole the show for me for the defensive players. The interior looks good. There's plenty that I am excited about, but I want to know what you're excited about. I want to know what you want me to pay attention to over the summer, who you want more information about. Let me know in the comments, or you can hit me up on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. But wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, And a special shout out to all of you for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back again tomorrow. I got some news to recap for you guys. Jeff Sims, a transfer quarterback from Nebraska, is coming in. We're going to talk about what his impact potentially means for the quarterback room after we highlighted it earlier this week. There's all sorts of other news, including recruiting and transfers to catch you up on as well. So tomorrow will be informative. I'll get you in the loop. I'll see you then. Till next time, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun.